Hello again, fellow audiophiles. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of my podcast, Making Waves with WaveTheory. If you would like an audio-only version of this podcast so you can listen on the go or just not be in front of a screen, you can stream or download from Podbean, link down in the description. These episodes are also available on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. Links down in the description. So head over to your platform of choice to listen, and please hit that follow button while you're there. All right, on with the show. Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am WaveTheory, and this is Making Waves with WaveTheory, a podcast. That's right, I've gone audio, so you don't have to look at my face if you don't want to. All right, today on this podcast episode, we are going to be talking about system building, and particularly this is about headphones. So how are you going to build a headphone system that you will love? Okay, some tips, some tricks, some things to think about here in this episode. And when I was thinking about, who should I have as a guest for this podcast to help me talk about this, I was thinking, you know what? I'm a reviewer. My system building needs are very, very different than the average end user. And so I could talk to other reviewers, but they very likely are in a similar situation as I am. It's like their system building needs are very different than most of the audience out there. So I was like, all right, what I need is an average Joe. Or in this case, as it turns out, an average Erik. You'll learn more about who Erik is here in a moment. So let's go ahead and do our musical intro, and then we will get to Erik and my conversation about headphone system building, tips and tricks and philosophies for building a headphone system you will love. So I've got here with me Erik. Hello, Erik. How are you?
Hey, Brian. I'm good. Good to be here.
So Erik is one of my patrons, has been for a while. He and I have bought and sold and traded numerous audio pieces, I would say, in there. So I know him well, and I know that he is an experienced system builder in a lot of different use cases. So I figured he would be a good guest to come on and talk about this from the perspective of an end user who has been through this a lot. And so again, for any new audience members out there, to date, I have been mostly a headphone and headphone system reviewer. So when we talk about system building, we're going to be looking at it through that lens for now. This could be an ongoing thing where we come back and we address different use cases, and who knows, someday maybe I will branch out into speakers or something like that, and we can have the conversation all over again with 2-channel. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But for today, we're going to talk about, your main headphone setup listening rig. Where you go in your house or at your desk or wherever it is, your easy chair that you go to get away from things and just get lost in the music with your headphones. That's going to be the use case that we talk about here to start. And I think to set that up, when Erik and I were doing show prep for this, and actually I should say this is the second time you and I have recorded this, because the first time we were getting to know this platform a little bit, and all of the audio settings were just not good. And I'm like, we cannot put this out there.
The jokes weren't very good the first time anyway. We're going to do better the second time, I'm sure.
Yeah, of course, better is going to be really easy to do. All right. Yeah. So, yeah, with any new platform and any new way of doing things, there's okay, what are the levels? What are the settings? We just didn't get it right the first time, so we're trying this again. And so hopefully it's a lot better. So if we reference something we've already talked about, it's because we've already talked about it. Right? And now you know why. Okay. What I want to do is kick it to Erik here for a moment, because when I asked you to talk about system building with me, you had a really crucial insight that is one of those things that seems obvious when you think about it, but sometimes it does just need to be said out loud. And that is about use cases. So why don't you go ahead and
Yeah.
tell me kind of what you were thinking when I brought this up.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. It's good to be here for round two. This is fun. So, yeah, use case really drives a lot of the way you invest your money into your system build. And the reviewer use case is its own use case, right? You're cycling
Mm,
through a lot of different gear. You Some gear you have to pay for, some gear you don't, right? Some of it you have on short-term loan, some long-term, so you listen to it quickly, or you get to sit on it for a little while. And all of that influences how you set up your system. Do you need to be able to swap in multiple DACs quickly, or do you need to be able to swap between different amplifiers or different digital front ends to be able to experiment with different DACs or all those different pieces of flexibility? And flexibility is one of the dimensions that you pay for. And so as an end user building a system, you have limited dollars, limited space, whatever constraints that your personal situation has. And if you're building your system with the flexibility of a reviewer, but you're not a reviewer, you're kind of putting money in places that it doesn't need to go for you, and you could build a system that really matches your use case better. So if you're a desktop use case, a portable use case, a listening chair use case, if you have small children, that's a different use case than if you live by yourself,
mm,
because the noise in the environment. Uh, and on, right? The
right.
parameters around how you use your hi-fi system really impact what makes the most sense for you to invest your dollars in.
And
Um,
so that's in
yeah,
large part why we specified earlier here in the episode that this episode really is about assembling your main, like, stay in place
yep.
listening rig, where you kick back at your desk or your easy chair or wherever your setup is, and you just get lost in it. We can come back in the future and we can talk about like a mobile rig or a transportable system. I know you also get into like a lot of TV and movie watching with your
Yep.
system, and so we could chat about that in a future episode too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like what you were saying in there about like the reviewer use case versus the end user, you told an interesting story, and I'm just going to
Yeah.
set it up a little bit here in our first go round. And that was like, so you mentioned like we reviewers need to be able to switch in and out DACs or amps, or
Mhm.
we need flexibility. Like my rig has at this point, like my YouTube channel is now getting close-ish to 4 years old, I believe. And I was writing for a good year and a half before that. And so, 5+ years on into a reviewing effort, like my system needs has been flexibility,
Mhm.
reliability. Everybody wants reliability, right?
Mhm.
But like reliability in terms of I need to be able to connect and disconnect, power up, power down, and everything, and just have everything take off and go, or I lose a lot of time, right?
Yep.
And yeah, I have switches in my system so that I can rapidly A B stuff and all of that. And even like in the rare instances anymore where I have to buy gear, because as you mentioned, some gear just stays, right?
Mhm.
And you can find a way to work with it. But in the rare instances, like when I buy gear, like you see over my shoulder here, for those who are watching on YouTube, okay, for those of you audio only, you'll just have to picture it in your mind. You can see my LTA Z10E amplifier. And I chose that amplifier for a variety of reasons. One, it's quite neutral.
Mhm.
So, like, it gives me a sense of, like, whatever it's powering, be it a headphone, an electrostatic headphone, or a speaker, very neutral signature. It's also very transparent to whatever DAC you plug into it.
Mhm.
And then, of course, as I just said, it will drive headphones, eStat headphones, and speakers.
Mhm.
So that's a level of flexibility that I would need. Even though it sounds great, like it was like my primary concern was not like my personal taste in sound preferences on that. It was
Mhm.
how I could use it as a workhorse.
Mhm.
That is very different than you or most of our listeners. And I
Yep.
get this is me rambling as I often do to set up your anecdote here, but I just wanted to like kind of contextualize that so your story makes a little bit more sense. You told a
Yeah.
very interesting story about when you were first getting into this, like how
Yeah.
watching reviews kind of made your system building kind of go in a funky direction. So why don't you tell that story?
Yeah. So I started getting into the hi-fi headphone space around the COVID-19 time period, like a lot of people did.
Mhm.
I was into it a little bit before that, but as work from home drug on, I started getting more and more into listening to my. At that time, I had I think I had a set of like Campfire Audio Comets and an Audio Quest Dragonfly Red. Like that was my whole setup at the beginning of COVID. So I was into it, right? I had some boutique pieces, but um,
Right. That
not
stuff
that
isn't
deep.
messing around stuff. Yeah.
No, but it's also like $200 in, right? I mean,
Yeah.
$100 DAC amp and a $100 set of IEMs. Um, but it was enough to get me interested in wanting to learn more. So I started watching YouTube, following reviewers, and one of the big reviewers at the time, um, uh, Zeos, was one of the guys that I followed quite a bit early on.
Mhm.
And he went on and on about how he had this set up with what he always calls it fiber optic connections, and it drives me nuts because Toslink is not fiber optic. LED blinking in plastic tube is not fiber optic. That's Toslink. Um,
Okay.
but he had this setup where he had, I think it was like an Origin DAC of some sort that allowed him to go
Oh, yeah,
US
yeah.
like
Micah
Origin,
Origin, I think.
Mica Origin. There we go.
Yeah.
But he could go USB in and then Toslink out, and then took that to a splitter and would have three um, Toslink cables sitting on his desk so that he could hook up three different DACs to one
Hmm.
source and could swap quickly. It would stay in sync if he switched between amplifiers with a switch box or something. And I thought it was really cool. And so due to the implications of parasocial relationships where you're watching someone like, oh, I want to be like them. um, I started trying it out and I ended up setting up almost the exact same thing on my desk where I had three different Toslink connections. And it took me a while to realize I had like one DAC hooked up to it with two little cables sitting there doing nothing. And then after a while, I was like, oh, I ended up with a second DAC. So then I had two hooked up. I only had one amp, so I had to like cable swap, and it made no real sense in the end, other than I was having fun experimenting with the technology in the digital front end there a little bit. But the use case was totally wrong. I had money spent on um, a very specific digital to digital converter, a splitter box, cables, that it wasn't bringing me any real value. And in fact, it was degrading the signal um, to get that flexibility. And it was just kind of the beginning of me realizing that my use case as an end user wasn't the same as a reviewer's use case. And if I just try to copy what they're doing, I'm not going to end up with something that's really the right build for me. Um,
Hmm.
I needed to um, take what I was learning from reviewers and apply it to my use case, or see where my experiences matched what the reviewer was describing. So I was hearing it the same way, and then learn from that rather than just try to direct copy and paste what anyone else was doing, let alone a reviewer, right? Even on like forums, discords, all of that, to copy and paste exactly what someone else is doing is almost never exactly what you're going to want.
Hmm.
It's kind of the part that makes sense for you and leave the rest behind.
Yeah. So, like, I had a couple of thoughts as you were telling this story in there. And, like, one of them is like, and I agree. And there's this tension
Mm-hmm.
in the story that you told too, insofar as you're talking about how copying what you saw from a reviewer, or at
Mm-hmm.
least roughly replicating it. I'm sure it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
100% exactly the same, but it was the same idea that you were trying to
Mm-hmm.
replicate. Led you down a path of like wasted money.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, you also learned a lot from that experience too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like as you said, you enjoy getting to know the technology, seeing what the different sounds were, and that sort of thing. And so, like we talked about this in round one of our recording, I think it's a good time to bring it up here. Is
Mm-hmm.
that number one? When you talk about system building, you are going to make mistakes. Okay,
Yeah.
everybody does. I made mistakes, you made mistakes. And a
Yep.
mistake is you just get a piece in that isn't right for you.
Yep.
Okay? On rare occasions, you might get something that's legitimately bad. Fortunately, that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
happen often.
Yep.
Okay, it does happen, but most of the time, the mistake, and I'm using air quotes around mistake for those who are just listening here, is that you just get something that's not right for you, or you might
Yes.
just get headed in a slightly, not the best direction for you.
Yep.
But I also want to remind people here, like there's a Thomas Edison quote. At least it's a quote that is attributed to Thomas Edison. It might be one of those that everybody thinks it was him, but it's not. I don't know. Okay. But the quote is something like, I haven't failed. I found 10,000 ways that don't work.
Yeah.
Right. Those mistakes are also valuable in their own right. You learn from
Hmm.
them. And so like, there can be a paralysis by analysis when it comes to system building a lot, and so my advice on how to handle that is realize that sometimes you're not going to get it 100% right, but you're going to learn from that too, and that can sometimes
Yeah.
be worth every dollar that you put into making that so-called mistake.
Oh, exactly, exactly. And you can't be married to any one purchase or system change that you make, right? Part of what goes into system building is getting comfortable with a little bit of buying and selling, and getting a little bit comfortable working in the used audio gear market, whether it's through US Audio Mart or Headfi's
Headfi,
buy
yeah,
sell, or just different people that you know on discords or forums, because it
right.
lets you discuss things with people, but also try things with reasonably low cost in terms of ability to flip it. Usually you can get in and out for about the same amount of money, give or take a little bit if you're careful. Um,
Hmm.
but it lets you try things, and you can't be afraid to make mistakes. Otherwise, you don't really figure out what you like, and you're just kind of getting a um, you get what you get if you don't experiment a little bit.
Are you enjoying this content? Please help me keep it going by becoming a member of my YouTube channel. If you become a member, you can enjoy benefits such as talking to me on Discord and getting to watch my videos early. Head over to youtube.com/@WaveTheorySound to sign up today. And I think that's a good segue into like starting to get more specific in our
Hmm.
advice here. As we just like continue to narrow down, starting with like philosophical principles and then getting into more specific
Hmm.
advice here. And like one of those is like when you are first getting into the headphone hobby, like no matter how you get here, like you get a nice headphone as a gift, or you're just like, you know what, I'm gonna try this because these,
Hmm.
Razer gaming headphones that I'm using aren't, all that great,
Hmm.
at least not for music listening and so forth. And so you get something, you try it, you're like, whoa, this is amazing, and it can get better,
Hmm.
At the same time, it's daunting because there are, a nearly infinite number of routes and combinations of gear you can put together, right,
Hmm.
in this world right now. And so you said something a moment ago about you've got to learn what your tastes are.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, the only way to really do that is to try some things.
Yep.
So if you're early on in the hobby and you're staring at it like, oh my gosh, there's so much out there, I don't know what to do, my advice is take a deep breath and
Hmm.
start somewhere.
Hmm.
Keep in mind what I just said. You're probably not going to be 100% correct right out of the gate, and that's okay.
Hmm.
Right? That's okay.
Yeah.
Right? So start somewhere. Get something and then do what you just said. Start saying, okay, what do I like about what I'm hearing? What do I
Yep.
not like about what I'm hearing? What do I want more of? What do I want less of? And make sure you are doing all of that with the music you love, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a whole other podcast on going down trying to learn to listen to audiophile music that you don't like. You're like, I
Yeah.
have to like this because I'm into audio. No, you
Mm,
don't have to like it.
no,
Listen
you
to what
don't.
you like.
Right. I
But you're totally
I am a metalhead to a degree. Like I listen to a lot of hard rock and heavy metal, which is not audiophile stuff.
good
It
stress
isn't.
tracks.
Yes, yes. Like, how fatiguing does this headphone get? Well, let's ask Mastodon.
right?
Yeah, anyway, carry on. You were saying
But
something.
well, yeah, I was gonna say, you just have to jump in somewhere. I started out, like I mentioned earlier, with a Campfire Audio Comet, which was their first attempt at a single balanced armature IEM. And by all objective, subjective discussion metrics of modern IEMs, they sound horrible. But at the time, I was having fun. I didn't know any better, and they sounded
Mm-hmm.
better than the commercially available stuff on the market 5 years ago. Um, and I don't exactly remember how I ended up with the Audio Quest Dragonfly Red. It's probably some Darko review that I
Mm-hmm.
ended up with picking that up. But it, it's everybody's financial situation's a little different. But for a couple $100, I was in the game. I had something interesting to listen to, and I could find other reviewers at the time on YouTube that were talking about it. So I could compare my experiences to theirs, and inevitably you find someone that's doing A/B analysis, comparing it to something else, and you start to think, oh, I'd like to try hooking this up to something else. And so my next purchase ended up being the original shit Fulla.
Mm-hmm.
Because somebody somewhere, I'm pretty sure, did a review comparing the Audio Quest USB DACs to this new shit Fulla little desktop glorified USB dongle DAC. Um,
Right.
and I ended up enjoying it. I ended up with my first use case separation. The audio file or the Audio Quest Dragonfly Red ended up being portable, transportable, going with my phone. And then the
Mm-hmm.
shit full lived on my desk at work. And I could have one set of IEMs and plug it into what I was doing. And I was off and running, making comparisons and trying things. Um, and at some point decided to try a different IEM. I think my first over-ear headphone was actually a DT770 that I
Okay.
got.
Yeah.
Um, and so, you just kind of pick a spot to start. And you can't go too far wrong, especially now. Boy, the entry level $100 stuff is so much better now than it was 5 years ago. Just try something and then watch reviews, compare it to other things, and when you're
Right.
ready to try comparing it, pick up something else to compare it to and sell the one you don't like.
I mean, that's another good point too. Like for someone who's just starting out on this journey, like you've probably heard somewhere the expression it was like cheap audio is good getting good and good audio is getting cheap,
Hmm.
something like that. And like that is increasingly true with every
Hmm.
new product generation, right? Like formats mature, ways of doing things mature, and
Yeah. Very
yeah,
little is
they keep getting
objectively
better,
bad.
better.
There
Yeah, that's
is
what I was saying
objectively bad,
earlier.
but
Like,
very less and less.
yeah, right. Okay, so yeah, so big step one on system building. Just start somewhere. Just get a headphone or
Hmm.
something like maybe you like bass. Like it's just that's a common thing. People like a lot of bass. So you watch reviews, you find a headphone that's reported from multiple sources, and like another big piece of advice: don't listen to just one reviewer, not even me, right? Because we're never going to agree
Yep.
100% on everything. And you like,
Oh,
you know, yeah, what? And so you need to do your research and get a variety of opinions. And if you start to see some consistency, like that's usually a good sign. Like both like consistency from reviewer to reviewer sometimes, that can be a good
yeah.
sign. It
Yeah.
has been misleading at
That.
times, I have to say. But then also like within that one reviewer, even if you don't agree with that one person, their consistency can be helpful to you because when they say this thing sounds warm, you know what that means. Okay,
Yeah.
but yeah, so start somewhere now and then like so listen to music you love, start taking good notes and saying, you know what, I want more bass, less bass, I want cleaner bass, I like these vocals are not prominent enough or they're too far forward or the treble is too sharp and my like my ears get tired and or all that or maybe the head clamp is too much because there could be fit and comfort issues going on there too. It's just all kinds of stuff like that. And now we can start this journey of like starting to like tailor your system build to your preferences and
Hmm.
your needs.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think as you go down that path, by far the most important next step really is the transducer, the IEM or the headphone, the thing that you're listening to. Um, it's the majority of what you're hearing. Of course, the amp, the DAC, the front, everything that goes into it contributes at some varying level. But the headphone is by far the biggest contributor. And so figuring
Yeah.
out ergonomics that you like, what weight level you're comfortable with, different sound signatures that you like, darker, brighter. And like you were just saying, finding reviewers that hear things the same way you do. One of the best things I kind of stumbled into early on was it's a lot easier to do this in some of the lower dollar headphones, but to pick up a headphone that a reviewer just reviewed and listen to it and see if you hear what they hear. And listen to a few different reviewers. Like the FT01 right now is extremely popular, and
Yep.
you could probably find 50 reviews on it if you tried. Well, pick that
Yeah.
up and
And it's
just
like
go reviewer to
150 bucks,
reviewer.
130 on sale. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
find one. You see the link in the comments below.
Link
I'll
in the
find my
description. There you go.
rhythm here.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
uh, but go through and find reviewers that hear it the same way you do, because our ears are anatomically different. Beards, glasses, ear canal length, so many things play into how you hear something. You and I had a really funny disagreement for quite a while, and we still do disagree on it. I really liked the Dan Clark Audio Expanse.
Yeah.
It
I mean, it was
worked.
funny because you were wrong, right?
Well, I did sell it eventually because
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
I was we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
But it was one of the few instances. It surprised me because you and I tend to hear things the same way, and that's how I've ended up following your channel so
Yeah,
much and
fairly
ended up
close.
talking a lot. Because
Yeah.
as you buy more expensive gear, you really need to know people who hear things like you do, or else
Hmm.
you're going to start yeeting thousands of dollars out the door on things that don't matter or that you don't like.
Or just take
Uh,
you in the wrong direction, right?
yeah, and then you got to recover it and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But I really liked the Dan Clark Audio Expanse. I heard it really. I liked the soundstage, the presentation, the detail. It was very relaxed and enjoyable for me. And many reviewers didn't hear it that way. And there's reasons why that headphone is more picky and more sensitive to different head shapes and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but it's worth some effort to find reviewers that hear things the way you do. Because then when they start reviewing things that are more expensive, there's a better chance that it's going to match what you like. You and I hear the Hi-Fiman HE1000 line very similarly. And so,
Hmm.
as those have come out, I think you and I have pretty much had identical notes on them over the years. Um,
Yeah. I
but
I mean, this is just a side note. Like, it seems to me like hi-fi mans are a little less sensitive to head shape
yep,
and fit than some. Um,
yep,
yeah, that doesn't mean that their tuning matches everyone's preferences because clearly they don't. But I think
yep,
I'm just picking up the impression that that what people hear from a hi-fi man is a little more consistent person to person
hmm
than some other headphones. And to also like, I also want to make sure that people understand I'm not anti Dan Clark because like if you can't see it, I am currently wearing the
yeah,
E3,
yeah,
which is their planar closeback, which is wonderful. Okay,
yep,
positive review, and it's one of those that I'm like, I gotta go get this one because it's an awesome reference point
yeah.
for closeback headphones, and so
Oh,
I
yeah.
did.
And
Yeah.
I just brought that up
Yeah.
as one of the few examples where you and I disagreed on something. But yeah,
Hmm.
the E3, you and I both enjoy it. It sounds great.
Yep. So, like, again, trying to get like more specific and like more like concrete, rubber meets the road kind of advice here. So let's assume, for moving the discussion forward, you have started somewhere and you have started to compile some notes on
Mm-hmm.
what you like, what you don't like, and so forth. The journey is not complete. Just gonna warn everybody. Like this journey may never actually be complete. Okay, for
Mm-hmm.
anyone, you hear the term end game out there, and like you know, there was that Marvel movie called Endgame, and then there were more Marvel movies, right? Like this.
Yep.
This idea of Endgame, I think honestly is just a bit mythical in this hobby. And so I guess that's another part of advice is just like learn to enjoy the journey, right?
Yep.
Because because it is. I'm just thinking there's a YouTube commenter out there that every time I say journey, he leaves me a very angry comment. And I'm just like, how is this anything other than a journey as you explore
Yeah.
what you like and don't like? Anyway.
It's a hobby. Have fun.
Yeah,
If you
yeah,
have fun, find something else to do.
exactly. So as I was thinking about, like, so when we get to like the nuts and bolts of putting a system together, then like
Hmm.
with this background stuff out of the way,
Hmm.
what I find interesting, and like to me, it's like a mathematical analogy, which I'm going to bring up because I teach physics, and so I'm a huge science and math nerd, and I think about it like the signal chain
Hmm.
works, source, like wherever your music is coming from, be that like a streaming service like Spotify, Qobuz,
Hmm.
Tidal, those kinds of things. So it goes like source, or maybe you're still into vinyl, so you've got your turntable, all that, and so then it goes, if it's a digital signal chain, it goes like source through maybe or maybe not a streamer, but then to a DAC, and then to an amp, and then to a headphone. Even if you buy an all-in-one DAC amp, it's still going to the DAC first, and then the headphone amp, and then
Hmm.
the headphone. But kind of like when you do algebra with order of operations, when you do a
Yeah.
computation, you go, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, like you do this order of
Hmm.
things, exponents first, or parentheses, exponents, you've got this order. But when you do algebra to try to solve an equation for the variable, you do order of operations backwards,
Hmm.
right? System building
Hmm.
early on, okay, we'll talk about when this may or may not change, but early on, I think you do the signal chain backwards. And you've already said it. Start with the transducer. The
Hmm.
most important thing that you can do is get that headphone, or if you're an IEM user, because IEMs just work better for you for whatever reason. Okay, like start with that transducer first.
Hmm. Yep, I
Yeah.
completely agree. Um,
Okay.
Headphone I am first, and then
Mm-hmm.
I like you're saying, headphone, then amp, then DAC. I kind of work, especially
Right.
early on, right?
Yes.
You have to have some base level, like we've been talking. You can't have just a headphone plugged into nothing. And if you plug it into your computer, you're going to be disappointed really fast. Um,
With most of them. Some of
with,
them you can do all
all right,
right with, but
MacBook Pro is maybe the exception. You can plug it in.
yeah, yeah.
But
But I mean, if you're
uh,
plugging it into like a Kindle Fire tablet, yeah, good luck.
yeah, yeah. But if
Yeah.
you really just want to get off the ground dirt cheap, do the standard recommendation, Apple dongle. As long as you don't have something difficult to drive,
Mm-hmm.
it'll Apple USB DAC dongle DAC. It'll get
Mm-hmm.
you started for not a lot of money, and then you can build from there. Um, but the next place I would spend money, once assuming you have a base level system, you've got your headphones plugged in, something you're enjoying, the next thing I would look at is the amp. Get the
Yes.
amp to a level that matches your headphone. It has enough power. You
Right.
like the coloration of the sound. Um, it has the features that you care about, given your use case. Do you care single-ended, balanced? Do you want switchable multiple inputs? Do you want two RCA inputs or two XLR inputs so you can have two different sources hooked into it? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
one for music, one for movies, wink, wink. So you can push a button to switch instead of swapping cables all the time or getting a switch box, right? Um,
Right.
so, the next step is really, I think, the amp. And then once you have an amp that's doing the things that you care about at that time, then to spend a little more money on the DAC and kind of keep building from there. Then the digital front end and power supplies.
Right. And like we live at a time where there are just a ton of good entry level options for
Hmm.
headphone amplifiers out there. Like there's a whole lot of them that I think it was like $99 was kind of like the entry point, because like there was the JDS Labs Atom, and there was like
Hmm.
the little monoprice monolith, what was it called, Liquid Spark, right?
Yep.
And then there was like the topping L30, although I think that was the one that caught on fire.
Yeah. Yep. Had one of
All
those.
that,
That was.
yeah. And then there was like the shit Magni um series, and like just a
Yep.
bunch. But The price, because everything is more expensive these days, the price has kind of gone up to about $130. I want to say, like, kind of roughly in that range for these entry level pieces. But there are a ton of options out there for those amps.
Well, and there's a lot to be learned there as well, right? You
Mm-hmm.
want to spend your time as you're working your way through the hobby, learning at each level.
Mm-hmm.
I totally remember having the L30 that caught fire. It never caught fire for me,
I was going to
thank
say, did
goodness.
yours catch fire? No.
No,
Yeah.
no, but I sold it pretty quick. I was kind of scared of it.
Yeah.
Um, but
Well, honestly, that's also one of the rare instances where I'm like, this isn't good,
mm,
right? Like, not only did it catch fire, but that was, to me, was one of those rare instances where I'm just like, this, even at this price, the sound I'm getting from this is not competitive with
so
the
that's
other
exactly
stuff
where I was
on the
going
market.
with
Yeah.
this actually. I had um, the shit Magni, one of the probably the second or third generation of that. I
Mm-hmm.
had the topping L30 and I had the JDS Labs Atom DAC or Atom amp.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All three of those at the same time, and that was where my dislike for topping really began because that by far was the most uncomfortable one to listen to. It
Mm-hmm.
really had something going on in the top end that did not sound right, and I enjoyed listening to the JDS Labs and the shit amps as well. And I ended up keeping the shit amp just because it was a little bit higher powered, had some more flexibility I cared about. I
Yeah.
love the JDS Lab sound. In fact, I have their Element 4 sitting on my desk today. I really like their sound, but at the
Mm-hmm.
time the feature set didn't match what I needed. They did a good job stripping features out for the sake of sound quality, and I wanted a few more features.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I ended up kind of going down the shit path for quite a while on entry level amps, going from the Magni to the Asgard to the Jotunheim 2, I think, is where I kind of ended my shit amp career.
Yeah.
Uh,
And, to any content moderators out there in a new audio platform, this is shit spelled SCHIIT, and it's the name of a company.
yeah,
Right? Don't put an explicit tag on us because you're thinking we're making a crude scatological term. I mean, we aren't. We kind of also are, but we're not.
that's
Yeah,
their whole marketing
that's
angle.
their whole marketing thing. Yeah. Anyway, and like so, right now here in like mid 2025, because you and I are shooting
Yeah.
this on July 1st, 2025, is like I have kind of come around to like the shit Magni Unity amp, which
Hmm.
just the amp
Yeah.
is like I think about either 120 or $130, somewhere right in that range,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And it's actually very good. It's got plenty of power. It's clean, like it's got a clean sound to it, and like good it's very good.
Yeah, and
It's
even low noise
also
for IEMs. It'll
low noise
really
for
cover the
yeah.
range.
Do they put the negative gain on those standard anymore? They
Oh, I'm
might. I
not
don't know,
sure,
but
but boy, I never had any noise issues with it after a couple generations in on the shit amps. They really did a nice
yeah.
job cleaning them
Like
up.
I know through like the 2010s when like shit was like even more of a startup than they are now. I don't know what the transition is from a startup to like an actual full on
Yeah.
humming along business. I don't know. Shit's doing really well, it seems. They keep putting out new stuff every other week at this point. Anyway, like through the 2010s, like the shit house sound was known as being a little bit dynamically compressed, I
Mm-hmm.
think. And I remember like even the Magni 3, you could kind of hear that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was like one reason why the JDS Labs Atom was a huge deal when it came out, is because it was
Yep.
like a cleaner and more accurate sound even than the Magni 3
Mm-hmm.
at the time.
Absolutely.
But the new Magnis are wonderful. Like they
Mm-hmm.
are wonderful. So what I'm saying on that one is like, at least here in the United States, where you can buy shit's products without huge export fees and markups and like all that kind of stuff, because I know they can be hard to get a hold of in Europe and other places. Like kind of just like my go-to recommendation that I think is going to work for a wide range of headphones and sound really good is the shit Magni Unity. There are other good ones, of
Yep.
course. That's just the one that comes to mind for me first right now.
Yep.
Yeah. And the nice thing about it is like that little amp will scale up with headphones too. Like, so if you have, I don't know, you mentioned the FIO FT1, right? If you've
Yep.
got the FT1 right now and you're driving it off the Magni Unity amp, and then you're like, you know what, I'm gonna up my headphone game, and then you grab something like the or even like a Sennheiser HD6XX, right? Mastrop Sennheiser collab there, because that's a common place to go because it's so well known and so well praised. Like even that little Magna Unity amp is going to give you a pretty good feel for what that headphone is like these days.
Definitely.
Right? Yeah. So that's one of those where it's like, okay, pick your headphone first, get an amp, something like the Magna Unity is going to stay with you for a headphone or two beyond that and give you a fairly good idea of what a lot of them sound like.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that my video reviews of audio gear are available for sale on Patreon? That's right, for just $5 a piece, you can buy access to all of my video reviews of audio gear, both before public release and commercial free, just $5 a piece. Head over to patreon.com/wavetheory1 for more info. So then DAC. This is another one of those where it's like early on, get your amp first. Once you got a headphone and an amp, okay, get a DAC that you can either plug into the Magna Unity or go ahead and get the little ESS DAC card that the Magna that shit puts in the Magna Unity in there, because that's pretty solid too, and that raises the combined price to like $200, $190 for black, I think, and like $200 for the silver version. Yeah.
Yep. The thing I liked about adding those DAC cards in on the shit amp, so it's a feature, right, that you can put the DAC in or not put the DAC in. I liked that it gave me some options for whether I wanted to run PC audio into it or if I wanted to use a separate DAC for a network streamer of some sort. So I could always just USB from my PC into it and use it for whatever computer audio I had going on. And then I could have a separate DAC signal chain that I could then bring in through RCAs to it. Because a common use case, right? You want PC audio and you want really good music audio, right? And so you can split those really nicely with that feature.
Yeah. Or like if you have a turntable, then having that analog input on something like the Magna Unity. I mean, you're going to need a turntable preamp, a phono preamp somewhere.
Yep.
Okay, but you can route your phono preamp into that Magna Unity as well.
Yeah, but if you don't need that, go get something else, like one of the JDS amps that don't have built-in DACs and don't
like JDS,
spend the dollars on that.
Yep, JDS Labs amps are still really excellent options down there. Gishelli Labs has a couple of like low-cost amplifiers that are also really good.
Yep.
So I mean, and I think like the Monolith Liquid Spark is still out there, still for sale. It's a bit long in the tooth now, but it's no slouch, right?
No.
It is no slouch.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah, that one is a little bit more colored sound. It's a little bit warmer, weightier, thicker kind of sound to it.
I think so.
But it's still like it's got plenty of power for an amp of that type. Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about continuing the journey here. So let's say, like hypothetically speaking, you have assembled your entry level ish headphone amp DAC system. You like it, and now you're like, I need more. Okay, because it's going to happen to a percentage where you're going to be like, more, right? And that could mean more resolution. It could mean more, I don't know, more bass, more treble, more mid-range presence, or less of one or all of those things. Okay, more soundstage, whatever the case may be. Okay, and so once you get above that, it's like now, again, it becomes really important to know what you want. Right? Like, and that's a theme that is running through all of this, is like, you've got to have a good idea of what you want and what you like. And if you ask someone like me or another reviewer or someone like you, a more experienced audiophile, like what should I buy? You got to tell that person what your music tastes are, what your sound preferences are, and roughly what budget you're looking at before they can be of any real use to you. Right?
Definitely.
Yeah. And so the recommendations, even though like we're talking about tailoring a system to a specific end user where it gets a lot more specific, the tips kind of generalize a little
Mm-hmm.
bit here because there are so many special and boutique options out there
Mm-hmm.
also that it's just like, okay, here's like, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean and the pirate code. They're more like guidelines anyway,
Yeah,
right? Like that's
yeah.
that's yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about here. Is they become more like guidelines anyway. I'm going to say something here that I have learned over my journey.
Mm-hmm.
So even though my system building needs are different, I do get to hear a wide range of gear at a whole bunch of different price points. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
one of the perks
Exactly.
of the gig. Okay, and it has been my observation that somewhere around this so-called mid-fi, and I'm using air quotes again, mid-fi range, which let's just roughly call like individual prices for individual pieces, roughly fall in maybe like the $400 to $1,000 range.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're kind of past budget gear here. You're kind of a little bit past budget enthusiast tier,
Yep.
and now you're in like, for lack of better term, mid-fi.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, somewhere in there, that order of operations in reverse thing that we talked about changes a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. I
Yeah.
still think headphone or transducer first. And if you
Mm-hmm.
were, and as we talked about, if you were smart about your entry level amp, you can still get a
Mm-hmm.
nicer headphone that maybe even is a little bit harder to drive and be okay for a little bit. Okay?
Yep.
In the mid fi, I still think then your next best option is the amp,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so there are lots of good options out there too. And I think like the sound character starts to change even more from amp to amp in this price range. And I know a lot of people like roll their eyes when I say amps can sound different. They're like, well, that only changes because of output impedance or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay, but they're also made with different capacitors and transistors and or maybe they're tube and just like there's a lot of reasons they sound different. Okay, uh, and so it's just like you start to be able to like tailor a specific amp to a specific headphone a little bit more there.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I can't tell anyone specifically do this because again, it's about tailoring to your price point. I, however, just like if I could tell myself how to do this all over again, if I were going to go back and do that, is say still get an amp in the mid-fi that's mostly neutral, and you can still play around with headphones, right? And get a good idea of what different headphones are as well, because you'll start with one headphone you really like.
Yeah.
Most of us don't stay with just one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I've tried to keep the coloration in my systems focused on the headphones. In general, I've really tried to keep my amps pretty neutral. You definitely run into some that lean a little warm or lean a little bit bright or
Mm-hmm.
have some different characteristics to it. But in general, what I've tended to keep are amplifiers that kind of just get out of the way. Um, because I want to hear the characteristic of the headphone and I want the amplifier just to faithfully reproduce what the DAC is giving it. And so where I've ended up is I want the headphone to give coloration and I want the DAC to give coloration and I want the amp to just be more power in between, as
Mm-hmm.
faithful of a reproduction of the DAC as possible. Um, but that's to each his own, right? That the
Mm-hmm.
whole tube amp industry exists for the opposite of that, right? It's that is specifically going after coloration at the amplifier level
Yeah,
and using different tubes
sometimes,
to
well,
tweak it.
most of the time, yeah. Like, I mean, there's a reason why there is a stereotypical tube sound, right?
Yeah.
Um, but like my LTA or LTA in
Oh yeah.
general, they're a much more neutral sounding, even though they're tube based.
Yep.
But yeah, and so like one of the reasons that I make this observation, like here in the mid fi again, I think stick with it. Headphone, amp, DAC is because the next step, when you really get into the hi-fi stuff, which again, just for conversational purposes, let's just say hi-fi is individual component prices of $1,000 or more, basically,
Mm-hmm.
right? Once you get into like the hi-fi space, a mid-fi amp drives most hi-fi headphones reasonably
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yep.
And a mid-fi amp also generally has the resolution and the control and all of that kind of stuff that the DAC starts to make an even bigger difference with that hi-fi headphone. So after the mid-fi, like you are on the path now, you are dead serious about what you're doing. You have realized that you have a screw loose, or maybe 3 or 4 screws loose, okay, as a lot of us do. And you're like looking at, $1,000+ per piece. And you're like, yeah, it's a lot of money, but it's starting to seem more and more reasonable these days. Okay. It's kind of funny how that happens, right? Like, then I think you go still headphone, get your hi-fi headphone, then get a DAC.
Yep.
And then get the amp at the end there. And so again, the reasons to me get just a wide range of gear in years of experience here is mid-fi amps scale up to hi-fi headphones better than mid-fi DACs scale up to hi-fi headphones.
Yep.
I think there are a couple of I think there are a couple of reasons for this. One, amplification, analog amplification is a much more mature circuit technology than even DACs. So digital to analog conversion has been around since like the late 70s, early 80s, so 40 plus years. But amplification, analog amplification has been going on since like what, the 1920s? Okay. Or even earlier than that. So like it's an even more mature format. So there's still space for like closer to revolutionary advancement with DACs, then it's more evolutionary at this point with amps.
Yep.
And so I think that kind of plays into the scaling. Go ahead.
Yeah. And maybe it's getting a little too far into the nerdy end of DACs, but assuming you're using a lossless audio source, a FLAC wave file, some sort of source that's not been compressed, at least in a lossy way, theoretically, you can reproduce exactly what was recorded at the microphone, given some errors along the way for A to D conversion and some of that. But really, that's going to be far beyond what most DACs can find. But what ends up happening is there's engineering approximations in the DAC to the theoretical reconstruction of the digital file that comes in. And we can argue round and round on whether or not we can hear those approximations, but that just means the engineers are doing a really good job of implementing those approximations. Are we putting the reconstruction filter in analog? Are we putting the reconstruction filter, or more heavy emphasis on the digital side of the reconstruction? It's just moving around engineering trade-offs and cost. And so that's why I think as you get more, along the lines of what you were saying, digital to analog conversion is a less mature technology. It sounds great. It's very mature in that regard. But if you go back to the 80s, most of the most of the DAC reconstruction was done with an analog low-pass filter at the Nyquist frequency. Those were big, they were inaccurate, they were expensive, and engineers realized, I can move a lot of this into a digital filter, and I can upsample and thereby make the analog filter less expensive, easier to design and build, and put all the burden on digital signal processing, which has gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so that's now why you see so many DACs getting cheaper and better. Is digital processing gets cheaper and better with time, kind of the Moore's law argument there. And so you can do more digital signal processing for less money and put less burden on the analog side of the reconstruction and get better sound or different sound through DSP. And so when you look at DACs, and especially as you get into the boutique stuff, they're doing all kinds of different techniques for the reconstruction filter, for the digital front end of the DAC. whether it's modulating it into DSD or some other pulse density modulation, or if they're doing a straight R2R ladder DAC conversion, all those interesting different boutique architectures, you start to hear some of those differences because they're reconstructing the digital with different algorithms. And some people
And so
care,
they
some
so
people
that
can't
means
hear
then
it, some
that
people don't care to hear it, but
yeah. Well,
there
but
are
that I mean
reasons.
those different reconstructions that you point out, and this is like a really important point to make, I think. Those different reconstructions you're talking about have an impact on the actual analog waveform that comes out of the
Absolutely.
DAC stage, right?
Absolutely.
And so like the what comes out then is going to have different wave displacements or wave magnitudes
Hmm.
at different times
Hmm.
than some other deck. And yeah, there are going to be situations in which you hear that. Okay, a good many situations in which you can hear those differences. But
Hmm.
anyway, go on.
Yeah. Well, because the DAC is calculating the values in between all the samples. If there's
Mm-hmm.
44.1 kilohertz worth of samples, it's not interpolating or guessing. It's mathematically calculating what should be there. And if you have
Mm-hmm.
enough processing power, you can theoretically calculate exactly what the points should be in between all of the samples. And that's where software like um, uh, PGGB, Pan-Galactic
Pan-galactic
Garble
gargle
Blaster,
blaster. Yeah,
it's
it's
like
an
the
oversampling software. Yeah.
yeah, it's like the end game of this where you let your computer spend an hour calculating all the samples in between for every song, and then you have much less work for your DAC to do. Um, but yeah, going off on a bit of a tangent
Yeah,
here.
this is getting
But
a little bit
this,
nerdy
sorry,
here. There are a couple of
but
points that
that's
came up in this though that I think are worth emphasizing. And like you mentioned the source, be it a FLAC or a WAV file. And I think
yeah.
one thing we do need to touch on here is that particularly once you reach that mid-fi level, I would argue it
Hmm.
actually happens earlier, but once you reach that mid-fi level, you're, a little bit more experienced listener now and you kind of have an idea of what to listen for. Make sure that you have a lossless source,
Yes,
right? Like,
absolutely.
no more Spotify. I mean, it's not that
Yeah.
Spotify is bad. I still use Spotify for like listening in the car because there it doesn't matter, or like for podcasts and stuff. But like get Tidal, get Qobuz, get Apple Music's lossless tier or Amazon's streaming
Hmm.
lossless tier or something like that, or play CDs or things like that. Use lossless sources because that really does make a difference in
Big
the
time.
ultimate sound quality that you're getting out of there. So that's one thought that I had,
Big
and
time.
you need to say something because I just completely blanked on the second thought. So talk for a minute. I'll
Well,
see if it comes back to me.
well, it's a good point though, because one of the things that's changed over the last 5 years a lot is how good the USB implementation is on DACs, especially at the
Mm,
mid-fi and hi-fi level. It used to be that, especially if you go back 4 or 5 years, you needed a good digital front end to go with a good DAC as you got into the hi-fi space, the hi-fi end, $1,000 plus. You
yeah,
needed a
because
dedicated
USB was
streamer.
horribly noisy for a
Yeah.
long time.
And
Yeah.
and the implementation in the DAC was horrible at rejecting the analog noise riding on the power and ground and data
Mm,
stream coming in. That's improved a lot. And so you can
dramatically.
get away a lot longer now with a good lossless source, a basic streamer into the USB input of a lot of DACs.
Okay. Or
Um,
just direct from a computer into the USB input of a
yeah,
lot of DACs.
exactly.
Like that has
It's
come a
gotten a
long,
lot
long way.
better.
It's not
It's
perfect yet, but it
no,
is definitely better than it was in like
I
even 10 years ago.
I yeah, I
5, 8,
still
yeah. Yeah.
I definitely still prefer dedicated network streamer
Mm-hmm.
through a dedicated digital to digital converter going
Yeah.
in through like an AES input into the DAC. But that's much more use case and DAC choice specific, right? There's many DACs out there where that front end that I have would not be the best option. I'd be better off just going straight from my network streamer USB into the USB input of the DAC. It's
Mm-hmm.
gotten so much better.
Right.
Um, so, you can
This
get away with not spending a bunch of money on that digital front end for a long,
yeah.
long time now.
This did remind me of what I wanted to talk about next. The other point that I blanked on there for a moment. And that is I think another reason why after the mid-fi the DAC upgrade becomes more consequential than the amp upgrade. Not saying that you shouldn't get a better amp, because you still get more control and, resolution and all that with an amp upgrade. It's just that oftentimes the magnitude of improvement, I think, is a little bit less when you jump from mid-fi amp to hi-fi amp than you go from mid-fi DAC to hi-fi DAC.
Yep.
And one of the things that we need to remember is that audio chains always are subtractive. I wanted to say lossy, but that gets confusing. What all that.
But you're right. Yeah.
They are subtractive in terms that, honestly, an electronically reproduced audio system can only try to minimize the damage that it is doing to the original sound source. Like me talking into this microphone right now, there's going to be some degradation in quality over just being in the room and hearing my voice into the microphone, and then through the A to D converter, and then through the transmission medium, and then, the digital to analog converter that you have to be using now because you're hearing what was digital audio, and so forth. Like, every step of the signal chain, you lose something.
Mm-hmm.
And once it's gone, it's gone. Like, transducers, headphones, IEM speakers are dumb devices insofar as they can only do what the amplifier tells them to do, right? And they cannot add back in information that was lost. Like, and I stress information here because you can play, like, equalization is a thing. You can add magnitude information back to the signal by saying amplify 60 hertz a little bit more than the rest. Okay, like, you can do that, but detail stuff, resolution stuff, once that's gone, it's gone at every step in the process. So another reason why I think the DAC upgrade after the mid-fi, getting into the hi-fi space, is a little bit more important, is because you lose less closer to the source. You're maintaining signal integrity a little bit better. Mid-fi amps are getting so much better about not losing that information. They still lose some, and yes, they lose more than a hi-fi amp, but it's less, comparatively speaking.
I think it's a really good way to put it, right? It's funny to say it this way, but the best that your digital audio is going to sound is while it's sitting as a digital file on your computer.
Mm-hmm.
From there, it only goes downhill because you start to approximate the original signal through reconstruction in the DAC. And then the DAC then outputs that as an analog waveform that is being transmitted through high quality media or mediums, but it's still, there is loss to it, right? And all the way through, you're trying to manage the loss of the original signal that you have.
Right. I mean, and somewhere there's a vinyl fan puffing out their chest and saying, like, this is why you don't do digital, and all of that. But it's like, well, you're still losing a lot off of a vinyl record too.
They're managing loss as well, just in their own way.
Yeah.
They're managing their own loss path.
Right. It's just that what is lost and how is different in an all analog path than in a path that has both digital and analog in it.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So I to me, that was an important point to get out there and so forth. So, like, you get into the hi-fi space for the reasons we've discussed, I would still say, like, headphone, either get it or, like, build to it. Because, like, when we first had this conversation, you mentioned an experience with the Susvara.
Yeah. I ended up with a chance to try Susvara way too early on in my hi-fi experience, and it was like the best amp I had at the time was a Singsor SA1, and theoretically it put out a fair bit of power, but my goodness, it didn't sound good. And so then when I put the Susvara on it, it was just a treble nightmare, and very unenjoyable. And I knew, I wanted. So what I ended up realizing is that if I ever wanted to reach the summit, the Susvara summit, if you will, right, which is maybe an evolving target at this point with other headphones coming out at that really high summit in space, I would have to build a system that could get there. And that was where I ended up back at amplifier upgrades, is I needed several watts of power, but also high quality power over a wide impedance range of the headphone and over a wide load range for the amount of current being drawn. Um,
Right. And
so
I think this is illustrative of the point that like at some point in this journey that's like it becomes so specific to the end
yeah,
user. And what's interesting about your story there is even though you didn't have the headphone, you were still
yeah,
building to a headphone, right?
yeah, actually, yeah,
Yeah, and so and again, like some of those hi-fi headphones, the higher up stuff, but they can be really, really hard to drive, or they can be
right.
incredibly picky, right?
Right.
Like
If
Focal
you want to drive
Utopia,
a
those kind of
exactly, if
yeah,
you want to drive a
yeah,
Utopia, you have to plan ahead. That
yes,
headphone, I met a French audiophile one on a business trip to Toulouse, France once that described it for me as the Utopia refuses to sound good until you give it an adequate source. And it's that idea of it is refusing to even sound good.
right,
You have to plan ahead for these things, right? Some of these
hmm
headphones are weird impedances, either peaks in weird places or really low impedances in weird places, and
right,
amplifiers can really struggle to dynamically deal with that.
yes, and it's just like it, it's also just interesting because like this is a story I remembered with the original Focal Utopia because there's the 2022 edition out there too. I have the original. Your experience with it was
Hmm.
the original too, I think. And even within the same brand and same model line,
Hmm.
that headphone can react in markedly different ways. The example I'm thinking of, and it's kind of like the mid-fi amp to hi-fi headphone stuff we're talking about here. If you had a Mark One, an original Lake People G111 amplifier, which was a
Hmm.
fantastic mid-fi amplifier,
Hmm.
and you plugged an original Focal Utopia into it, you are in for a miserable experience, right? That the
Yeah.
Utopia did not respond well to what the lake people was doing, or that particular lake people just couldn't respond to the really funky impedance curve that
Yeah.
the Utopia brings, and it got sharp and sibilant and shrill and just like the Utopia was like stridently unhappy, okay,
Hmm.
on that amp. But the G111 Mark II and the Utopia
Ah,
are a pretty fantastic match to each
oh,
other, hilariously
didn't
almost.
know that. I'd believe
Yeah,
it though.
yeah. So just like that, whatever. And I'm not saying that Lake people intentionally made the Mark II to sound good with the Utopia, because I don't think a lot of people are going to
Oh,
stick with that combination in the wild for very long,
but I think
right?
it's trickle down from
Exactly.
the
Yes.
Bioelectrics and the Nimbus by
Mm-hmm.
Lake people handled the Utopia quite well, much
Yes.
earlier.
Mm-hmm. And that's because like those are like Lake people has nailed driving high impedance headphones for a while now, right?
Yep.
So they can handle the big voltage swings that a high impedance headphone asks for or requires. And like even though Utopia has like a nominal impedance of 80 ohms, it spikes to around 300 ohms around its driver's resonant frequency, which is somewhere in the 60 to
Hmm.
80 hertz range, somewhere in there.
Yep.
And Lake People amps, which again like Vioelectrics and Nimbus are like kind of like the Buick and Cadillac brands, to the Lake People Chevy. Okay, just same analogy there. Um, they have always been good at that, and so
Yep.
yeah, like it's trickle down as you say. But like there is an example of how a mid-fi amp can scale up
Absolutely.
to a very hi-fi headphone and be
Yeah.
okay for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Another example would be like the Aoun S17 Pro series
Okay.
driving the Susvara, right? That
Really?
that
Yeah.
combo that combo works really well sonically. The original S17 Pro has some thermal protection, thermal management issues that show up when you try to push, an immovable object like the
Yeah.
Susvara for too long. But that
Yeah.
happens. So, I mean, that may sound like it's getting into the weeds a little bit, but I think those are like kind of real world practical examples of the kinds of things that you have to think about when you're doing system building, especially as the level of gear goes up in both cost and performance.
Yeah. Well, and I think a big part of the point here really is start learning to think through your system like this, right? Not that you have the exact same thoughts that we have, but be a little bit of a philosopher about your system. Why did you pick what you have? And what do you like about it? What do you not like about it? Where is it bringing you value? Where is it not bringing you value? And then you can start to kind of tweak and move things around. Some people aren't into that. Some people are like, I just want to listen to the music. I don't want to get too far into tweaking my system. Fine, whatever. That's everybody's got their piece of this hobby that they really enjoy. But from a system building perspective, I've really enjoyed it. And the more I've learned to be a little bit philosophical about it, the better I've been able to spend my money on pieces that made a difference and understand why they made a difference, and then build from there to make other adjustments around it.
Mm-hmm. Music for this episode was graciously provided by Cider. I provided a link to his Bandcamp page down in the description below. Click on over there to check out his music or listen on all of the major streaming platforms. I would really like Making Waves to be a platform for unknown and upstart artists to be exposed to our music-oriented hobby and our music-loving audience. So if you are an artist or you know an artist who would like their music featured here, please reach out to me either via a personal message on Headphone or by finding my email address in the About Me tab of my YouTube homepage. Erik and I have just a few more things to say about system building, then stick around after that for a full demo track from Cider. We're like an hour and 7 minutes into this one, but I still think there's a couple of important points still out there. We'll try to get through them a little bit quickly. What about things like streamers, okay, or upgrading power supplies or cables, okay? Like, when is it appropriate to start thinking about those things? What say you?
So in general, my rule of thumb around cables has consistently been spending about 10% of the price of the unit that it's connected to. Some of that is just so that I don't have a $1 cable connected to a $1,000 amp. That just doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah, that's a tenth of a percent.
Yeah, but if you have a $1,000 amp, a $100 cable doesn't. It feels about right. And it turns out that the quality of what you're getting and the potential sonic benefits from it tend to kind of track at about that level for quite a while until you hit the crazy summit where you're spending $1,000 on a cable that are hooked up to a $2,000 DAC or something.
I'm gonna jump in real quick here because your answers are good, but I think they might be answering a question that's one step removed from what I'm asking here. And I think the question I'm asking that a lot of people would be asking, like, to start, is like, when do I even start to think about whether or not I need a streamer or whether I need a power supply upgrade or a cable upgrade? And I'm just going to throw out generally, and then you can riff on this, is I think really you start worrying about that stuff when your main signal chain, defined as transducer amp DAC, once that has reached a point of relative stability, okay, where you are mostly happy with what you are hearing here, and now it's just about the subtle tweaks rather than, the big, coarse versus fine, the coarse side of adjustments in terms of getting to your tastes.
Yeah, for me, it kind of naturally happened when I hit what you're saying there, a headphone DAC amp combo that I was really enjoying and I was comfortable with. And I wanted to just tweak things a little bit and see kind of what it did. And I do think going after power is what I would maybe go after first, after I had a signal chain setup that I was enjoying. Because I do think a lot of the trade-offs that happen in the definitely lo-fi, entry level, and mid-fi are around power supply cost. So addressing your power conditioning, power quality you do actually see significant benefits in that mid-fi to entry-level range. Um,
Mm,
DACs have gotten so much better at their USB implementation that going after the digital front end isn't as urgent earlier in the journey as it used to be. But
yeah.
I would still start going after that once I got my toe dipped into the power realm and I kind of was happy with the quality of what I was doing with the power. I would then go after the digital front end. I do think getting a streamer and getting away from a PC is a good thing to do earlier on. But a Raspberry Pi is a streamer, and so for $100 streamer, a Weem Mini, Weem Ultra, a couple $100, and you can be into a decent streamer. And doing that, I think earlier on is valuable just to get away from the PC.
Mhm.
Um, but for me, what I found is there's so many trade-offs in power. Going after that early made a difference, and then from there, going after the digital front end and getting that cleaned up.
Yeah. And this is one of those things where, a lot of people like to talk about the law of diminishing returns and so forth. And that's a whole other conversation that actually I
Yeah.
talked with 3 other reviewers about that, a couple of years ago now. I think we put that law of diminishing returns video out. I can put a link in the description to that video. But not universally, but generally, what I have found is like when you get your main system in place and then you upgrade a power supply somewhere, like you got your streamer and the streamer sounds good, and or even a DAC, let's say, like that has an outboard power supply. The Gishelli J2S is a
Yeah.
good example here. The stock power supply on the Gishelli J2S is fine. You'll get by with it. It will sound good. That's an excellent sounding DAC in stock form. But you upgrade the power supply on it. You get an external outboard LPS linear power supply upgrade. First of all, your Gino and Sherry would want me to tell you you void the warranty if you do that. So if you get a power supply and you fry your Gishelli product, that's on you. Okay, but if you are willing to risk it, and as long as you match the voltage, it's very low risk. Okay,
Yeah.
you get the an external power supply. You don't change the fundamental character of the J2S. The J2S still sounds like the J2S, but it sounds more like the J2S. It is a better expression of that J2S sound. For me, that's typically what power does. Like it gets cleaner, clearer, and allows the character of whatever it's powering to
Yeah.
shine through even more.
You're not going to make it into something it's not. You're going to
Right.
help it be more of what it is.
Right. And that is, I think, generally true, even like with like, cabling.
Yeah.
The Utopia is a good example. It's like there are cables you put the Utopia on, and the Utopia just becomes easier to please,
Yep.
but it's still the Utopia, right? That
Yep.
fundamental character that makes it a special headphone is still there. It's just a little bit more accessible now, right?
Hmm.
That kind of stuff is what I observe there. Streamers, individual streamers, are kind of like DACs insofar as like you can color the sound with however it's handling the digital management a little bit
Hmm.
on there. My preference is to go as neutral on the streamer as you possibly can, and if you want to color
Hmm.
your system, go elsewhere.
Yep.
Do it elsewhere. Okay. So there's just a few thoughts there. Anything to add real quick?
No, I think that makes that a lot of sense, and it matches really my experience and what I've tried to do as well. Clean power, clean digital front end. I like the character of my system. I try to have it come from the DAC and the headphones. And to be honest, I ended up building most of my system around the DAC that I have. I found a DAC sound that I liked, and I really just went gung ho on how do I make that DAC sound come through better with better amps, better cables, better power, better digital front end, so that I could hear more of what I liked about that DAC.
Okay. One last thing that I want to touch on quickly here, and this can be its own whole episode someday,
Hmm.
and very likely should be equalization, right? And
Yeah.
I bring this up because there are a lot of claims out there that, equalization can take, a hi-fi min Ananda Nano and make it sound like a Susvara. Okay, and give you like that level of performance just by playing with the EQ a little bit. No, like, no, you can't do that. Does equalization change the sound? Yes, absolutely, intentionally so. Because what equalization is doing is it's taking the audible frequency spectrum from about 20 hertz to about 20,000 hertz or 20 kilohertz, and depending on how you adjust your bands and all of that, what it's telling the audio system to do is to amplify certain speaker or certain frequency ranges more or less than others.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. That can help in some situations. That will change the tone and the sound that you are hearing. There is some evidence that's never been really specifically found in the literature and all that. Like, you play around in the 2 kilohertz range, you can kind of change human perception of soundstage a little bit in there. Again, that's mostly anecdotal. I have heard it, but it's not one of those things that has been firmly established in scientific literature yet. Okay. The point that I'm trying to make here, we can unpack this in a future episode, either with you or another guest who likes EQ, because I know you're not a huge EQer.
I have opinions on EQ.
Well, okay, we can come back to that. The reason I'm putting this out there is I'm going to caution against letting the ability to equalize have undue influence on your system building journey. That's the connection that I want to make here. It's if you use EQ, it really only should be to make subtle fixes to things and not make the system something it's not. No, you cannot turn a Nanda Nano into a Susvara. Okay? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, why? All right, this gets a little bit into my opinion of it. Why would you? I want an Ananda Nano to sound like an Ananda Nano. That's why I put an Ananda Nano on my head. Right? I want a Theo FT1 to sound like a Theo FT1.
Well, I think the response there is when you look at the price difference between the Ananda Nano, which is $420-ish right now, and a Susvara, which is still MSRP 6,000. Used, you get between 2,500 and 2,800 now. Okay, that's still a big difference. So I mean, I get the impulse behind that, but it comes down to do you remember how we just said it a few minutes ago? Audio signal chains only ever damage the sound that you are going to hear. The best we can hope for is we either minimize the damage or we control it in a way that's pleasing. Right? Yep. Those are the options. Okay? And the Susvara does less damage. Right? It resolves so much more.
Powered right.
It can if it's powered right. It does so much less damage to the sound than an Ananda Nano does because its drivers can move in response to the incoming signal much better than what the Ananda Nano's drivers can do. Right? So it's more accurate, to whatever is in the chain. So equalization does not fix what has been lost.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
It only can change tone and that sort of thing. So that's an important thing. And that's back to once it's gone, it's gone. Equalization does not put stuff back in. It can't. Yeah. Right? It just changes the perceived tone in there.
Yep. It gives it a little flavor. My favorite use of EQ is on movie watching. You can give it a little subwoofer boost on the low end because movies will rumble a little better.
Exactly.
But that's about it.
Because if there's a train running through the scene, there should be a train running through your head, at least sonically, when you watch a movie. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a whole other topic actually that you're bringing up here. I think it'll be really fun to discuss at another time because I've honestly gotten to a point where I quit trying to think in terms of reproduction of the original. And I've come to a place where I want to hear the Susvara's interpretation of what this sounds like. I want to hear what the Utopia's interpretation of this sounds like. I think of my headphones, I'm going to sound like I'm a nut job. I think of them like a performer. I want to hear the Utopia's rendition of this song. Is it truthful to the original? Guaranteed no. But I like the way this singer sings. I like this headphone sound. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, and again, like yes, equalization is its own whole subject and can of worms and minefield. Okay, frankly, but when you comes down to system building, there is some overlap there. And it's just like I'm going to caution people against the attitude that I can get $6,000 of performance from a $600 headphone if I use EQ. No, you can't. Okay? No, you can't. Like, there's a lot of science and physics behind why that's true in there. And it just comes down to every step of the chain loses things. And once it's gone, it's gone. Equalization cannot put it back in.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
So, everybody knows exactly how to build a system now, right? We have solved it. And it just comes back to, these are tips. These are things to think about. This is your journey, right?
Exactly.
You are
it's
not
a hobby.
Your journey and your preferences and how you want to put it together is not wrong. Okay? It is only wrong if it doesn't work for you. Okay?
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And develop your own opinions, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what makes it fun, and have a philosophy about it.
Yeah.
It's a hobby. Have a good time.
Yeah. If you're not having fun, then you need to get out.
Go find something else to do.
Find something else to do. All right. Thanks, Erik, for coming in and sharing your experience
and
your tips. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks to all of you for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one. Enjoy the music, everyone.
Good. Thank you.
Another big thank you to Erik for joining me to talk about system building, and a big thank you to you, the audience, for listening and or watching. Keep an eye out for a live stream to follow up this episode about a week after it goes public to further discuss system building and for me to answer some of your questions in the live stream format. As promised, we are going to end with a demo track from Cider. This track is called Interstellar. I'll catch you all in the next episode. As always, thanks for listening and enjoy the music.